So, got a new sway bar here for the Impala, just the front side. That's all I'm working on right now, but you can look at the difference in the thickness between the two. Just very noticeably, this new one that I got is quite a bit thicker, and honestly I don't even know what size it was, because the one I ordered off of Summit got delayed, and when I checked the site it said 1 year for delivery, and so I called them up and so I canceled that order. And so here I got this other one off of Summit again. Cost I think $30 more, but as you can see it's probably quite a bit higher quality. I think the original one I got was just a stock replacement, so just this thick, but this one I got here is quite a bit thicker. So I think I'm going to put this guy on, and I'm putting the car back together right now. So you see there I got this side partially reassembled here, and just kind of going through this. The whole reassembly, I still have the coil spring compressor in there, and I'm gonna tighten down all the bushings once I get put the jack back underneath and get the ride height set so that I can tighten the bushings. But get the control arm put in there, I thought, when everything was loose-ish yet, and that way I didn't have to fight things as much. And so yeah, making progress on the car, and we'll be going through on the other side. This is the first side I've been doing, so that the other side will get into the details of how you do everything. Wanted to do it once before I started making a video, so I didn't have to redo everything, but this way I can tell you everything I did wrong, and you can get to learn from my mistakes. Okay, so now that I've got one side put back together, you can see the other side there, it's all painted black and it's put back onto the car. Thought I'd do this side now and kind of go over how I'm doing everything now that I've done it all the wrong way. I can tell you what the wrong way was and show you what the right way is, and do it right the first time. So as you see here, I actually already got the wheel hub off the spindle and everything, so I'll just go over quick how I did that. First thing, bought this $13 tool up at O'Reilly's. Now this is another one of those rental tools, so if you return it, I think in 48 hours or 72, something like that, you get a full refund for it. Now, the way that this works, I'll try to show you here. Basically, these two hooks are going to slide. I'm on the wrong side. It's tough to see. These two hooks are going to slide around on the bar here, and then you tighten the screw down and it'll push the bolt out. So every tie rod and ball joint fitting, that's how I got these out, was with this guy. Now you only need a 2-prong here, but in some situations this doesn't quite line up. I believe it was on this top ball joint here. When I'm putting this on there, this would want to swivel out of there. So the way I did that was one hand, after I got it tightened up, one hand on the wrench and one hand on a pry bar holding this straight. And I left the spring, I didn't put the spring compressor in yet, because this way I had the extra spring force coming down to help push out this ball joint here. So that actually helped, and it came out pretty easy. Before I did all this, of course, I sprayed it all with WD-40. Just any sort of penetrating oil will work, but that's just what I had. So I did all that and took all the bolts out and everything, took all the cotter pins out. And then, so when it came time to actually start taking this side apart, all I did was I put my spring compressor on and I tightened it up. I picked up this side with the jack after it's already been tightened, and then so I was able to just pull this wheel hub off real easy. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower down the jack, and this spring will still be compressed, which was easy to compress at that point. And then it'll just come straight down and I'll be able to pull it right off. So that's the goal, at least. I'm going to try to tighten this up a little bit more right now, actually, make it just a little bit easier for me. But then I'll just lower down the jack and the spring will stay compressed. It'll come right out. I'll be able to pull this whole lower control arm off with the one bolt on the back. You can see the upper control arm is already loose. So after that, then I'll have this whole side disassembled. Alright, so I got my coil spring out, like I said, just by lowering down the jack. I still have the jack in there under the lower control arm, but Like I said, I just tightened it up a little, the spring compressor up a little bit more, lowered the jack down, and that compressor held the spring tight so that when I lowered the jack it didn't extend all the way. And now this lower control arm's loose. I got a bolt to undo on the back. You can see my strut arm here is already been, I took the bolt off the front of that already. So got one bolt that's loose already to take out on the bottom and 2 bolts on the top, and I'll have this whole suspension disassembled here. Okay, so I have the lower control arm out. Here's the hole for it. Now, one thing to note is this bolt, basically it's like a cam. You see how this washer is offset on this head. So when you're pulling this out of the bolt hole, if it's not coming out and it's getting stuck, it's because this cam is in the wrong spot. So this bolt needs to be aligned just right so that it can go in or out of the bolt hole. So just keep that in mind as you're taking this bolt out. Alright, so here I got the upper control arm, and you can see this is on the frame here, the 2 bolts that are holding it on. So this is a really difficult bolt to get at. It's a lot easier if you have 2 people. Best way I found, because I'm doing it by myself, you got a wrench on this side and a socket on this side with an extension. So you have one arm going around the fender and under the wheel well with the control arm lifted up, and there's the head of the bolt. So it's a really tough one to get at, but you can definitely do it if you have an extension on a socket set. But with 2 wrenches, I don't think it's possible to do it. Okay, so I got everything taken off there. So my next step is I'm going to take these and take them over to the shop where I got an air compressor and sandblast them all down and disassemble, take all the bushings out, put new bushings in, new ball joints. I have those sitting in a box. So I'll get them painted up, they'll look real pretty. Then I'll get it put back on, put the brakes on, and then this front end should be ready to drop on the ground. Okay, so I'm disassembling the upper control arm here. If you look at the rubber bushing here, it's just, the rubber is actually just kind of it's worn out, it's gone. And this side's even worse. It's time to replace. So I'm glad I'm doing that. And then for the the ball joint here, this thing is, wow, that's solid. Doesn't want to move at all. There it goes. Finally goes. Plus I cut it when I was taking it off, so it's gonna have to be replaced too. But on this, these aren't bolts on the top, these are rivets. So these are either going to need to be drilled out or cut off or something to get this ball joint off, because with the new replacement ones, they all come with bolts. So you take off the rivets and you bolt in the new ones. So that's just how it works. So you have to get that off. I'll show you how I do it and we'll go from there. Okay, so this seems to be working pretty good now. What I'm doing, grinding off the rivets there. Once I grind them smooth with the grinder, then I can get the drill bit. There's not a hump over it anymore, and you can still see the circle outline of the rivet. So take a drill bit and drill it out then. And one thing to keep in mind is the rivet holes, they actually need to be drilled out bigger to get the bolts in. I think they need to go up to like maybe a 5/16 bolt size. So don't be worried about missing a little bit and drilling the hole bigger. Just come back in with a bigger drill bit anyways, and you're going to drill the holes bigger. So that'll all work out alright, but this is working pretty good for me. Just grind the top of the rivet off and drill it out. Okay, so now that I've got the ball joint out, I'm going to get the bar out here to get these bushings. So basically the best way that I found on the other one to do this is to get the rubber out, so you can get this bar out, and then once this bar is out, then you got a much better angle to hit your bushing casing out. It works a lot easier that way, but I'm sure that there's a better way to do this. But what I do is I get the torch, this rubber bushing will light on fire, it'll burn for a little bit, you can blow it out. Make sure you do this in a safe place. But then you do both sides, and then this bar is just, it's free. You can pull the rubber out and then everything's off. So that's how I did it on the last one. It worked pretty good. It's not recommended. Okay, so you see I got it pulled apart here. So basically once this rubber in the bushing here gets heated up, it becomes really soft, so then you can slide the thing actually by hand. If you're careful enough with how you're heating it, you can slide it back and forth until you can get one piece of rubber pulled out. Now make sure you have the fire blown out and you're using pliers or something to pull that rubber out. But then once that's done, then you can slide this bar out, and then all it takes is a hammer with just a quick blow on either side here to get those bushings off. Now I do have to work with metal casing on this side from the bushing, but that's not too bad, I don't think. Just I should be able to just get a chisel in there and pry it off, so not a big deal. Okay, so on the lower control arm, I'm having some major problems here. Basically, I'm just cutting it off. Couldn't get I got the internal bushing out, but I couldn't get the rubber off actually, so I ended up cutting a hole through it to get the rubber out, and that's sizzling down there. Put that fire out, but now I'm just going to end up cutting this out almost up to the side. Just cut as much of these off as I can, so that way I only have to push the ring out, just a little bit, so that'll make it easier. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I figured when I had the spindle off here, I would go ahead and just take a sandblaster and try to get most of the rust off and some of the grease. And obviously I still have more work to do on this one. I got a lot of grease on here yet, but just a quick once over, kind of take all the rust off. I got some work behind there. I left the brake cylinder on there just because I figured why not, I'm going to replace it anyways. It's okay if some sand gets down in there because like I said, I'm replacing it. So, but I thought this will do pretty good. Bought some cheap black paint for it, but this is my nifty creation for a sandblasting cabinet. I bought a cheap sandblaster from Sears. It was like $40 and a $7 bag of sand, 50 pounds worth. So you can see it's everywhere on the floor, but you can scoop it right back up, and there's a screen on the top of here, so you can just pour it right back in there, and it works pretty good. Make sure you have gloves. Face shield's a pretty good idea, but that's of course have a couple lights on there, but that's been working pretty good. I changed out the nozzle in the gun and put a bigger orifice in there, so it allowed more airflow through there, and that's been working wonderfully actually. So it allows a lot more airflow, pulls a lot more sand through, and it'll work a lot faster, especially on these heavy duty parts. Now if you're doing body work, you don't want that bigger orifice, but for this it works pretty good. You can see these are some of my finished products here. Just a couple of parts off of the front end here. I just took after I blasted them, just take that top layer off, hit them with a flat black paint, and it makes them look pretty decent. So I'm going to put the bushings in. Now on these, this is the lower control arm here. The bushing only goes in one way. You can see it's two different levels, two different ODs here, and it won't fit in this way. It will fit in this way. So basically what needs to happen is this needs to be pressed into the holes here. So the way that I'm going to go about pressing it in, instead of trying to get a hammer and putting it on there and hitting it into place, I got a hydraulic press here that I'm going to use. And the only issue with this is I can press right here, but then this will collapse on itself. I don't know if it's just because it's old metal or that's just how strong it was. So what I'm going to do, this side is supported, this side is not. Get another piece and hold that into place right there, brace it into place. And so then when I'm pressing on this doesn't collapse, this won't collapse. The bushing has to go into place that way. So that's the way I'm going to go about it right here. Not going to film it because I don't have 16 hands, but that's how it's going to happen. Okay, so here you see I got my bushing put into place. One thing I did not remember to mention, what I did was I put a couple sockets on it so that the socket would fit right on here, so I'm not putting the pressure right into the middle of that bushing on the rubber. And then on the bottom side, you see how this extrudes past the bottom face here, so I put another socket on that's more than big enough so that the bushing can come into the gap in here. So I conveniently had these big sockets, otherwise there's pieces of pipe or something else that can work. Okay, so working on the upper control arm now. You see these bushings, they're not pushed in yet. They will slide into the holes, or they'll start into the holes for you, so that makes it easier for alignment purposes. Basically you just put it in, and again I'm using some sockets over top of it, and that way they just fit over top, so you push all the pressure onto the metal here instead of onto your rubber bushing. But so I'm gonna put one end on the bottom, the other second on the top, and this should fill the gap, and I'll be able to press it down into place, and I'll get both of them done at the same time. Okay, so again, having the problem where you would have these two that aren't going to hold very well, so I cut a piece of angle iron here, and it fits kind of just in there, and so I'm going to leave that in there when I'm pressing it, so that it gives this upper control arm some more support so it doesn't collapse on itself. That way I can just press them in. Okay, so back at the car now, and I'm starting to put the coil spring on along with the lower control arm. So you see how this is done. It doesn't seem like the safest method, but that's about the best way to do it. Is you put a jack on the bottom side in a way that it's not going to slip off of the car there. Of course, on the bolt here, you can't see it very well. I just have that finger tight. So you put that all the way in and just finger tight, because you want the car at riding height before you tighten down that bushing. So here I have a coil spring condenser because I'm changing out the coil springs. If you're not changing out the coil springs, you want one of those coil spring compressors. You put it on and then you don't undo it until you put your bushing or your control arm back in. Otherwise you're going to fight that coil spring the whole way. It holds the coil spring tight, and that's it. Don't change it. I'm changing the coil springs, so this is a pain. I have a 1/2 inch impact, and this is all the tighter it could tighten it. The spring's hardly compressed. I only have the top on one side so that I get a little bit extra compression, so it'll kind of bow out this side. So this side's tighter than this side, and that'll kind of meet the curve that I have here a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, I have the jack in place now. Basically, I'm going to jack it up just a little bit until I get to the point where my car is just starting to come up off my jack. Okay, at that point, come to the coil spring compressor, tighten that down some more. And then, because that way we have the full weight of the car on it, and it's a lot easier to compress. So tighten the coil spring compressor down some more, jack it up some more, tighten this some more, jack it up some more, tighten this some more, until I get it compressed enough that the control arm is up into place. Once that's in place, I need to put my upper control arm in place yet, but then I can, if I have the upper and the lower in place, then I can put the wheel hub back on, and if that's on, tighten everything down, tighten the ball joints down, not the control arm bushings or anything, and then keep the weight of the car on it, coil spring compressor off, tighten down all the bushings. So that's my plan. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so after, I don't know, 6 or 7 times of retightening the coil spring here, I'm able to get this lined up on there. So you can see I don't even have the nut on there yet, but I have a bushing up there so I can pull this down just a little bit more, just enough. Now the bottom, I put that on when I saw that it was that close. I put the bottom on, tightened it up all the way. That pulls this hub up all the way up to the top, so we get as much room as possible. You go up to the top there, see I can squeeze that down. That's more than enough to get the thread started and get that tightened down. Now the jack, you see I have going parallel or sideways with the car because that motion of the coil spring gets a little bit of sideways movement, so my jack stand on the other side was actually starting to tip over for me. So move the jack sideways, and then the jack will move in and out as it needs to adjust for that. So that way I don't tip the car over. But for right now, it's going together nicely. Almost have the wheel spindle on completely. Okay, so I got my upper nut on and the cotter pin put in. So right now the left side of the car here is all supported on the jack, and the right side is on the jack stand there. So this is actually it'd be equivalent to the car just self-supporting itself right now. So by that I mean it'd be the same thing if all four tires were on the ground. So what I'm going to do, because it's supported like this, I'm going to tighten up all the bushings. So the upper control arm, the lower control arm, get those all tightened up. That way, again, so it's like similar to the situation that would be in, so it's closest to the situation that would be in the bushings in the middle situation. Get all the bushings tightened up so that they're in the same spot that they would be in normal driving conditions. Alright, so I got all my bushings tightened down for the upper and lower control arms. I got finished installing my sway bar. Had to drill a couple new holes for that, so I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. We'll see if I like it or if I go back to a OEM style. But only thing holding me back is setting the front drums here on this side. That, and I ordered a couple of new dust caps for the wheel bearings, and those aren't going to be until Tuesday. So that tire on that side has to come back off yet, and there's a couple of caps there for the tires and the wheels rims. So that's the only thing holding it back from getting put on the ground right now. So yeah, should be just a quick little, 15-20 minutes of work to get that done, and then we'll be back sitting on the ground, and we'll see if we can get it started and running.